My 14-year-old son beat his dad's new wife unconscious at their wedding, and I'm so proud of him. My boy is 14, and at his dad's wedding he knocked his father's new wife out cold. I'll be honest with you, I couldn't have been prouder. The news came to me through my commanding officer. He called me into his office and said, flat and serious, "Your son has been arrested for felony assault at your ex-husband's wedding. You need to get home immediately." At the time, I was stationed in Germany. I hadn't laid eyes on either of my boys in over 8 months. The thought hit me hard. My gentle teenager, the one who quit wrestling because he hated the idea of causing pain, was now being accused of savagely attacking a woman right there at the altar. I jumped on an emergency flight, 18 hours straight back to the States, and went directly to Daniel's place, my ex-husband's house. My son was there. I remember stepping out of the car and noticing the stains on the driveway. Dark, dried blood, hers. My chest tightened, but I walked up and rang the bell anyway. Daniel opened the door, his face twisted with fury. "We're pressing charges," he spat. I forced myself calm. "I'm not taking anyone's side until I hear from both of you," I said, brushing past him into the house. The living room felt like a courtroom. Daniel's parents were planted on the couch, his brother Grant leaning near the fireplace, his sister Marla standing in the corner like she was ready to flee. Vanessa's parents, her mom and dad, stood stiff as guard dogs near the wall. And then there was Vanessa herself, sitting center stage, her face bandaged, nose splinted, both eyes purpled, her cheeks swollen. She kept crying into tissues, careful not to press too hard on the bruises. And right there in the middle of this hostile circle sat my son, my 14-year-old, the same boy who once told me he never killed bugs because that could have been me if I'd been born an ant. The same boy who spent afternoons showing his little stepbrother how to fold paper cranes. He sat tall, back straight, chin lifted, eyes locked on mine. No apology, no hesitation, just steady, unflinching pride. And I saw it clear as day. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done. Daniel's voice cut in. "Your son destroyed our family. Look what he did to her face." Vanessa sobbed harder, her voice breaking. "He's an animal. They're trying him as an adult, right?" Daniel's father, Grandpa, shook his head in disgust. I looked at my boy again. His knuckles were raw, split open, swollen. There didn't seem to be a reason strong enough to explain this. So I asked him to tell me his side. He scanned the room slowly, meeting every pair of eyes. And then, with his voice calm but sharp, he said, "You want the truth? She's been molesting me for 6 months. That's why I hit her." The air froze. My world stopped. And then the room exploded. Shouts everywhere. "Liar. Disgusting. How dare you?" Vanessa's face flickered for the briefest second before she buried it in louder wails. "He's making it up. I've been nothing but loving," she cried. Her mother stormed forward, pointing at my son. "You evil little." But her father caught her arm, his face pale, like he already knew. Amid the chaos, my boy pulled out his phone. His hands were steady as he swiped open a hidden photo folder. I leaned over and saw enough to make my stomach twist. Daniel's hands shook as he looked at the screen. His voice came out hollow, robotic. Those could be anyone's. Anyone could have, but he didn't sound like he believed it. Vanessa lunged, trying to snatch the phone. "Those are out of context. I was just..." She stopped herself mid-sentence, realizing too late that she'd admitted they were real. My son stood, his voice shaking now, anger bubbling under the surface. "Dad, I told you 3 months ago. You said she was just being affectionate." Daniel stammered. "I didn't, I thought." My boy turned to Daniel's father. "Grandpa, you laughed. Said, 'Lucky boy, wish I had that problem at 14. The old man's face drained from red to pale. He glanced between Vanessa and his grandson, and something in his expression cracked. Then my son turned to Daniel's sister. "Aunt Marla, you told me not to be dramatic." Marla was already backing toward the door, tears streaming down her face. Oh God, I thought you were just..." "And you, Uncle Grant," my son's voice cut sharper now. "You told me I should be grateful." Grant buried his head in his hands. "Jesus Christ, I was joking. I didn't know she was actually..." "Grandma," my boy whispered, his voice breaking now. "You said boys can't be raped by women." Grandma dropped onto the couch, clutching her rosary, whispering prayers through trembling lips. My son's voice rose. "Every one of you told me to shut up. Every single one." Across the room, Vanessa's parents hissed in low voices at each other. Her father's words cut through. "Not again, Patricia. You said she was better." That word, again, hung in the air like smoke. But then my son added something that froze us all. "That's not even why I hit her." I turned to him, stunned. "What do you mean that's not why?" His voice cracked, tears finally falling. "Last week I caught her sneaking out of Jacob's room at 2 in the morning. He's 9. And that's when Vanessa broke. Her mask slipped. Her words came out sharp. That little brat came on to me. Daniel spun on her, grabbing her shoulders. What did you just say? For the first time, fear showed in her eyes. My son was sobbing now, ragged gasps tearing out of him. The morning of your wedding I begged you. You said, not today. I knew nothing I said would stop her, so I stopped her the only way I could. He wiped his eyes, bolted upstairs, and came back carrying his little brother in his arms. Jacob's face was buried in his shoulder. Jacob, he whispered, did Vanessa touch you? The 9-year-old nodded. Then he lifted his pajama shorts. Bruises marked the inside of his thighs. Vanessa's mother screamed at her daughter. You promised. You went to therapy. You swore this would never happen again. Vanessa just stood there, mask gone, her battered face twisted in contempt. And then my son spoke one last time. We're kids, and every adult in this room chose her over us. That's when I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Vanessa's parents begged me to talk, promised they'd make the charges go away. I tuned them out. At some point, Vanessa ran off to the bathroom. God knows what she did in there, but I didn't care. 10 minutes later, she came back out just as the police pulled into the driveway. They hauled her off in cuffs. I grabbed my boys and drove to my best friend's place, thinking we might finally breathe. But 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was a detective, his tone all business. We need you down at the station. Now. I drove over with my stomach in knots, dread heavy in my chest. They walked me into a narrow hallway that reeked of old coffee and bleach. At the end, they opened the door to a bare interrogation room, just a metal table and 2 plastic chairs. The detective slid a manila folder across to me. Take a look, he said. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were screenshots, text messages, supposedly between me and Vanessa. Messages saying things like I trusted her judgment completely while I was away, that I gave her permission to handle my son however she saw fit, that boys needed discipline and firm boundaries. The timestamps were from 3 months back, right when my son had first told Daniel what was happening. I stared at those messages, stunned. Words I had never written, conversations I had never had. The detective sat across from me, studying my face, waiting to see how I'd react. The detective told me those messages had been pulled from Vanessa's phone after her arrest. Then he looked me straight in the eye and asked if I had ever given her permission to lay a hand on my son, physically discipline him. Before I could even process that, he followed up with something that nearly made me choke. Had I told her she could use sexual contact as some twisted form of teaching or punishment? I snapped back at him immediately, absolutely not. I had never, in any universe, sent those messages. I demanded they pull my phone records straight from the carrier to prove it. He explained they'd need to hold on to my phone for forensic analysis, to compare everything side by side. And that's when the reality hit me like a punch. I wasn't being treated like a witness anymore. They were looking at me as a possible accomplice. They marched me into another room where a technician started photographing my hands from every angle, then rolled each of my fingers in ink and pressed them onto fingerprint cards. He told me it was just procedure. They needed to officially rule me out as part of the crimes. Still, the word accomplice made my stomach twist. It was obvious. Vanessa was trying to drag me down with her. She wanted it to look like I not only knew what she was doing but approved of it. For 3 solid hours, they peppered me with questions about every detail of my connection with her. When had I first met her? How often did we talk? What did we talk about? Had we ever discussed discipline for the boys? Did I ever notice changes in my son's behavior? Why didn't I come home sooner if I suspected something was wrong? Every question felt like a setup, like a trap designed to corner me. When they finally let me go, I was told my phone was staying in their custody, and I wasn't allowed to leave town. Walking out of that station, it felt like the walls were closing in on my chest. I didn't even drive home. I went straight to the office of Harper Mabel Grove, an attorney my best friend had vouched for. She took one look at me and swept everything else off her desk to make time. In her office, I poured everything out. The wedding, my son's confession, those fabricated text messages. Harper listened, typing like her fingers were on fire. She immediately filed preservation orders with every major phone carrier and social media company, explaining that Vanessa probably used a spoofing app or faked screenshots during those 10 minutes she locked herself in the bathroom. Harper told me our best shot was to pull the real carrier records to prove those messages never came from me. She also filed requests to comb through Vanessa's search history, betting we'd find evidence of her researching how to fake texts. Then she leaned across the desk and gave me a clear warning. Do not talk to the police again without me in the room. She knew exactly what Vanessa was up to, muddying the waters, creating reasonable doubt for her own defense. The very next morning, a man from Child Protective Services showed up at my friend's house where we were staying. His name was Derek Oakridge. He said he needed to interview both boys separately as part of the investigation. He was gentle, but very deliberate. With my older son, Derek walked through everything step by step. My boy described the first night Vanessa came into his room, how she waited until Daniel was asleep, and the threats she whispered if he dared to tell. Derek wrote everything down, page after page, and had my son sign each one. Then he spoke with Jacob in another room. My little guy was scared, but he told Derek the truth, that Vanessa had been in his room too. He pulled up his pajama shorts and showed the fading bruises on his thighs. Derek quietly took photos of each mark, documenting them in detail. And I kept circling back in my head to those 10 minutes Vanessa spent in the bathroom before the cops showed up. 10 minutes is forever when the police are literally on the way. Combine that with her mom blurting out, "Not again," and the mention of therapy, it made my blood run cold wondering just how many other kids she had hurt before. Derek arranged for a nurse practitioner to do a full physical exam on both boys. Then he sat with me and explained what came next. A safety plan was being put in place, one that allowed me contact with my kids, but only under supervision at the CPS office with a social worker present. Humiliating? Absolutely. But I didn't hesitate, because their safety came first. Derek told me the criminal case against Vanessa would proceed no matter what happened with my situation. He said the boys' disclosures were credible and consistent, and Jacob's physical evidence backed them up. Still, he warned me, Vanessa's defense attorney would almost certainly wave those fake messages around to argue that I was involved, or at least willfully blind. The next few days were a strange mix of chaos and waiting. Harper moved fast. She got the carrier records that proved I never sent those texts. The metadata confirmed they were manufactured on Vanessa's phone with a third-party app. On top of that, she dug up search history from Vanessa's laptop showing she'd been looking up how to fake text messages for court and downloading spoofing apps the week before the wedding. The police detective later called Harper to say I was no longer under suspicion. Still, I was a key witness, and my name was wrapped tightly around the case. But my phone buzzed the same day, flashing a military number. It was Chandler Birchgrove from JAG. He told me my security clearance was under review because of the investigation. My emergency leave was extended, but I was being placed on administrative hold. Translation: I couldn't return to duty until the whole thing was resolved. I sat there in my car, head against the steering wheel, feeling like my career was unraveling while my boys needed me more than ever. Harper called me right then. She'd gotten hold of the actual screenshots Vanessa had handed over to the police. Looking at them on her screen, she immediately noticed inconsistencies. The font wasn't right for my phone model, the timestamp format was wrong, and the spacing between messages was inconsistent. She'd already called in a digital forensics expert, Mason Setterglen, to go over the evidence properly. He was on his way to her office. And before I could even process all that, another call came through, this time from Devon Pines Hire with Victim Services. She told me she'd scheduled a medical exam for Jacob at the Children's Hospital later that afternoon. I drove Jacob to the hospital myself, but when we reached the exam room, they stopped me at the door, said I had to wait in the hallway. My little boy looked so tiny as he followed the nurse and doctor inside, lost in that hospital gown. I paced that hallway for 3 hours straight, staring at my phone every couple of minutes, trying not to imagine what they might be finding. Twice the nurse stepped out to bring him juice boxes, and each time I caught a glimpse of him perched on the exam table, swinging his legs like a kid who wanted to be anywhere else in the world. When it was finally over, Jacob walked out clutching a stuffed bear they'd given him, eyes on the floor, unable to meet mine. Devon followed, carrying a thick folder of notes. She told me the findings lined up with everything Jacob had disclosed. Almost as soon as we left, my phone lit up with voicemails from Daniel. He was losing his mind because the safety plan kept him from seeing Jacob unless it was supervised. He left 4 raging messages back to back. First one, he blamed me, claimed I'd poisoned our son against Vanessa. Second one, he turned on Vanessa, called her a predator. Third message, he turned on our son, blaming him for ruining his wedding. And by the fourth, he'd circled back to me again, screaming that I should have warned him about Vanessa, like I'd known any of this ahead of time. His parents started calling too, but I deleted those without even listening. I couldn't stomach it. That same day, Vanessa posted bail. Her parents covered it. And within hours her lawyer had slapped me with a restraining order. The paperwork claimed I had masterminded the whole situation just to get custody of Jacob, and that I had coached my son to attack her. She was spinning herself as the victim, making me out to be some bitter, jealous ex-wife out for revenge. Harper told me this was textbook predator behavior. Flip the script, paint the abuser as the victim. The next morning, Derek Oakridge arranged for my older son's CPS interview at the Children's Advocacy Center. That room had cameras everywhere and a big observation window, but Derek made it feel safe enough for him to talk. And he did. He told Derek everything, piece by piece. He gave exact dates, recalling the moment 3 months earlier when he told his dad about the abuse. He repeated the very words his grandfather had used while laughing it off. He remembered the dress his aunt was wearing the day she told him not to be dramatic, and the TV show playing in the background when his uncle said he should be grateful. Derek wrote it all down, building a timeline that showed exactly which adults had been told, and how every one of them had chosen to ignore him. Meanwhile, the safety plan meant both boys were only allowed to be with me at my friend's house, under strict supervision. We fell into this strange, exhausting routine. I showed up every morning at 7 to get them ready for school. I left when the bus came, then came back at 3 when they returned. By 8 at night, I had to leave again. That part cut me to pieces, because nighttime was when Jacob's nightmares hit hardest. My friend would text me updates, telling me he was crying for me, and I couldn't go back until morning. We lived like that for weeks, just waiting on court dates and investigations to grind forward. Then an email came from Jacob's school counselor, and it turned my stomach. She had pulled his records from the past year and saw the changes as clear as day. 6 months ago, right when Vanessa moved in, his grades dropped from A's to C's. He'd gone from perfect attendance to 12 absences. His teachers had been writing notes, withdrawn, not participating, falling asleep in class. The counselor had even called Daniel, but he brushed it off, saying Jacob was just adjusting to a new stepmom. The signs had been there in black and white, and no one acted. About that same time, Harper forwarded me another development. The detective had found a voice memo on Vanessa's phone, supposedly of me threatening to ruin her life if she married Daniel. He warned us. It sounded convincing. Harper demanded the original file, not just a copy, so Mason, the digital forensics guy, could tear it apart. When Mason got his hands on it, he started with the metadata. The file had been created only 2 days before the wedding. Then he looked at the audio itself. The wave patterns were all over the place, with background noise cutting in and out. He pulled the layers apart and found obvious splicing, pieces of words stitched together from different sources. The pitch modulation didn't match natural speech, and the audio had those telltale digital artifacts you get with AI voice generators. Mason said flat out he could prove in court it was a fake, cobbled together from at least 3 recordings and an AI tool. Harper immediately filed it as evidence and pushed for Vanessa's phone carrier records. She warned it would take weeks. Every single day dragged like a month. I barely slept, knowing Vanessa was out there spinning lies, free on bail. Harper kept reminding me, building a solid case takes time. But patience isn't easy when your family's been gutted and your career is hanging by a thread. 2 days later, Harper forwarded me something marked confidential. It was an email from Vanessa's father. He admitted she'd had an incident with a neighbor's child 5 years ago. The family had packed up and moved states after it happened. He wanted immunity before giving us details. Harper told me only the prosecutor could offer that deal, and that would take time too. The restraining order hearing finally came up, and I thought, maybe, at last, the court would see reason. Harper argued hard, showing there was no evidence I'd ever threatened Vanessa, that all I'd done was protect my son. But the judge barely looked at anything. He issued mutual no-contact orders, saying that with serious allegations on both sides, he had to be cautious. I wanted to shout that being cautious should mean protecting the children, not protecting their abuser. Meanwhile, Jacob went through his official medical exam at the children's hospital. The doctor's findings backed up his disclosure, but the report was written in that careful, clinical language. Injuries consistent with reported mechanism, findings suggestive of trauma. All the right words for court, but none of the plain truth we all already knew. Then Harper got a call from a police officer reviewing body cam footage from the wedding. Harper told me the medical report alone would go a long way in strengthening the criminal case. Later that afternoon, the detective pulled me into his office. He warned me point blank not to talk to Daniel's family. Even if I was just checking in, he said, any contact between witnesses could be twisted into tampering. Harper took it further. She said from now on, every bit of communication had to flow through her office. No exceptions. She set me up with a special email account just for case-related messages, one she could monitor to protect me from any claims of interference. 2 days later, she managed to get a judge to sign off on a full forensic imaging of Vanessa's phone. The tech team would be able to dig out deleted files and expose any hidden apps. Vanessa's lawyer fought it tooth and nail, saying it violated her privacy, but eventually the judge sided with us. Not long after, the phone company finally turned over the complete records of every call and text from my number for the past year. Harper spread the pages across her conference table and marked the key dates in bright yellow. On every single day Vanessa claimed I had threatened her, there was nothing. No texts, no calls. Harper leaned back in her chair and said, "This is our first rock-solid piece of proof she's lying." She filed it with the court that same afternoon while I sat in her office chewing stale vending machine crackers, too strung out to taste them. The next morning, Mason called with bigger news. While combing through Vanessa's phone, he'd found a spoofing app hidden inside a fake calculator folder. It had been installed at exactly 11:47 p.m. the night of the wedding, right when Vanessa locked herself in the bathroom after we called the police. The app could generate fake texts and make screenshots look real. Mason backed it up with timestamped technical reports and a full app history. Harper sent everything to the prosecutor, and within an hour he called back. He admitted the evidence made him less inclined to pursue charges against me, but said he wouldn't officially close the investigation yet. Prosecutors like to hedge to protect themselves from lawsuits. Harper told me not to stress, but I couldn't stop the panic from clawing at me. 3 days later, things got worse. My phone lit up with notifications from numbers I didn't recognize. Someone had leaked details of the case online, my name, my photo. At first, messages trickled in with strangers saying they believed me. But the tide shifted fast. Within hours, my voicemail was drowning in death threats. Emails filled with graphic descriptions of what people wanted to do to me showed up at my work account. Then someone posted my friend's home address, the house where the boys and I were staying, and threatened to burn it down. We scrambled. Harper had me screenshot everything and file reports. We installed security cameras around the house. I had to change my number twice in 1 week. My friends' kids were terrified. Cars were slowing down to take pictures of their home. Harper ended up hiring a private security company to patrol the neighborhood and escort us to court. The internet mob had already decided I was guilty, no matter what the evidence said. Then, out of nowhere, a letter arrived from Marla. Her handwriting was shaky. She wrote that she was sorry for not believing my son. Grant sent a single text saying he wasn't picking sides, but needed distance from all of it. Daniel's parents stopped responding to calls altogether, like we didn't exist. The family was splitting apart in every direction, everyone finding their own way to bury the guilt. That same week, CPS showed up at my friend's house with new paperwork. They said Jacob needed therapeutic foster placement, and that my friend's family qualified since they had the right training. It meant Jacob could stay in a safe, familiar place while also getting specialized support. The social worker brought toys and books to ease the transition. My friend's kids stepped up, gently teaching him card games and letting him win more often than not. For the first time in months, Jacob laughed again. 2 weeks crawled by before Vanessa's lawyer filed a motion to have Jacob's photos excluded from evidence. He claimed they'd been illegally obtained. If the motion stuck, it could force my son to testify about how he'd gotten them. Harper started drafting counterarguments immediately, determined to keep the photos admissible. The hearing was set for the following month, with everyone required to attend. Meanwhile, Jacob had to face juvenile court for the assault charges. The judge reviewed the evidence and offered him a diversion program instead of prosecution. Twice-a-week therapy and 60 hours of community service at the animal shelter. If he completed everything, his record would stay clean. Jacob didn't say a word, just nodded and signed the papers, his hands shaking slightly. The military called me that same week. They scheduled an administrative board hearing, citing how the negative publicity was affecting unit morale and base security. My humanitarian leave and even my security clearance were suddenly under review. I had to submit page after page of documentation justifying my actions, like defending my son needed justification. One thing gnawed at me. Why had Vanessa waited until she was locked in that bathroom to install the spoofing app? The timing was too neat, like she already had a backup plan lined up for if the wedding imploded. When the suppression hearing came, the judge grilled Vanessa's lawyer over the inconsistencies. Mason had found timestamps that didn't line up and metadata proving files were created after she barricaded herself in the bathroom. The lawyer stumbled over explanations while the judge scribbled notes. Vanessa sat stiffly at the table, her bruises faded but her hand brushing her cheek as if to remind everyone they'd been there. After 3 hours of testimony, the judge ended it with a promise to rule within 2 weeks. Then CPS finalized their investigation. Their report was blunt. Vanessa had abused both boys. And Daniel? He was guilty of failing to protect his own children from a known danger. The judge ordered Daniel into weekly parenting classes for 6 months straight. On top of that, the safety plan got stretched out another half year, this time with surprise home visits built in. To my surprise, Daniel actually showed up to the classes without making excuses. He sat in the back row, quietly scribbling notes, asking questions about warning signs he should have caught sooner. You could see his anger shifting. It wasn't aimed at me anymore. It was pointed squarely at Vanessa as the evidence against her kept stacking up. He even started sending short, awkward emails now and then, asking how Jacob was holding up. Then one morning, I woke up to find my inbox and Facebook full of hateful messages. Dozens of them. They weren't just generic insults. These people knew personal details only Vanessa could have shared. Harper documented every single message and had the IP addresses traced. They all led right back to Vanessa's apartment building. We filed contempt charges since she was clearly breaking the no-contact order by hiding behind fake accounts and friends. The judge wasted no time scheduling an emergency hearing to decide if her bail should be revoked. Vanessa showed up with a new lawyer who tried arguing she couldn't be held responsible for what friends posted online. But Harper had hard proof Vanessa herself had been logged into the accounts that sent the threats. Meanwhile, Jacob had started trauma therapy. For the first 3 sessions, he didn't say a word, just sat at the little table drawing birds and trees while the therapist patiently waited him out. On the 4th session, he finally whispered a single sentence, "I feel dirty all the time." The therapist gave him a special soap to use whenever the feelings got overwhelming. Week by week, Jacob began opening up in small bursts, though sometimes he'd freeze mid-sentence and go right back to sketching birds. The therapist assured me it was normal, that healing takes time. Later, Jacob started using play dolls to act out what had happened. Every session was carefully documented for the criminal case. My friend's family was incredible with him. They treated him like one of their own. Slowly, I started to see glimpses of his smile again. Around then, the military board finished reviewing the mountain of documents I'd submitted, plus testimony from Harper about the false allegations. Their decision: extend my humanitarian leave, but when I returned, I'd be on administrative duty. My clearance was safe for now, but flagged for review again in 6 months. Daniel's parents finally sent a short email after weeks of silence. They admitted they should have believed my son from the start, but said they needed more time to process everything. Grant began texting again, asking if the boys needed anything. Marla mailed gift cards for clothes and toys, but still couldn't bring herself to see us face to face. Little by little, the family was trying to patch itself back together, though the guilt hung in the air. The school called me 3 days later about planning Jacob's return. I sat in a conference room with the principal, 2 counselors, and the special education coordinator. They kept throwing around terms like trauma-informed approach and modified schedule while handing me a pile of paperwork. The plan was simple: start with half-days, slowly work up to full-time over 6 weeks. A counselor would check on him twice a day. He'd get extra time for tests and permission to leave class if he felt overwhelmed. The principal swore everything would stay confidential, but I knew better. Schools have their grapevines. Sure enough, by the time we left, I caught teachers whispering in the hallway. That same afternoon, I got an email notification. The promotion list had been posted. I scrolled through name after name. 15 years of peers moving up the ladder. My name wasn't there. My CO had warned me, but seeing it in black and white made my chest tighten. All those deployments, all the spotless evaluations, wiped out by one mess I didn't even cause. I shut the laptop, trying not to think about the retirement points I'd never earned now. 2 days later, a certified letter landed in the mailbox from Vanessa's family's lawyer. They demanded we sign non-disclosure agreements or face a $2 million defamation lawsuit. According to them, we'd ruined Vanessa's reputation with lies. I called Harper immediately. She actually laughed when I read her the letter aloud. "They're scared," she said. "This is desperation." We met at a coffee shop that same afternoon. Harper showed up with a stack of documents she'd already pulled: Vanessa's arrest record, CPS findings, all of it. She pointed to a section of the NDA. "Look here. They want the boys gagged for life. They wouldn't even be allowed to talk about the abuse in therapy." She drew thick red lines across whole pages, shaking her head. Over the next week, Harper went toe-to-toe with their lawyers. They dangled offers: $50,000, then $100,000, then $200,000, to make us walk away. Every time, Harper repeated the same words: "My clients want justice, not money." Their lawyer snapped back, threatening to drown us in legal fees. Harper didn't even flinch. "Try it. I work on contingency for abuse cases." Eventually, she slid her counterproposal across the table. "The criminal case continues. No NDAs, no money. Period." Their lawyer's face turned red, but he still took the papers with him. Not long after, the prosecutor called me with an update on Vanessa's case. She'd been offered a plea deal: 18 months for misdemeanor assault. My stomach dropped. A misdemeanor? After everything she'd done? The prosecutor sounded worn out. "Her lawyer's good," he admitted. "They're claiming the evidence is all circumstantial." He explained how they were filing motion after motion, trying to toss Jacob's photos, claiming his testimony was coached. Every delay tactic in the book. A trial, he said, was at least 8 months away. 8 months of waiting. 8 months of bills piling up. 8 months of Jacob being dragged back into it over and over. That night, my phone rang around 11. It was Jacob. His small voice cracked through the line. I can't sleep. She's in my dreams. He was crying. I walked him through the breathing exercises his therapist taught us. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. We repeated it together for 10 minutes until his breathing slowed. Then Daniel got on the phone. His voice was heavy. This happens every night now. He won't sleep in his own bed. First thing the next morning, I called Jacob's therapist for an emergency session. She fit him in that afternoon. 3 weeks crawled by until Jacob's juvenile court date. The judge went over his therapy attendance and the counselor's reports. Jacob hadn't missed a single session. The judge approved his diversion program with conditions. 100 hours of community service at the animal shelter. Weekly therapy for a year. Monthly check-ins with a probation officer. No contact with Vanessa or her family. My son nodded at each requirement. The judge reminded him this was his chance to avoid a permanent record. We started the community service that weekend, watching my son clean kennels and walk dogs. You'd never know what he'd been through. The animals loved him immediately. Harper called the next morning with good news. I filed a motion to get Vanessa's previous therapy records. Vanessa's family fought it hard, claiming privacy rights. But Harper had found a precedent about pattern behavior and abuse cases. The judge sided with us. The records from her previous therapist in Michigan are being sent over. Harper's voice had an edge of excitement. There might be other victims. We'd know within 2 weeks what those records contained. That same day, I got called into my commander's office. The formal reprimand was waiting on his desk. Conduct unbecoming for the negative attention brought to the unit. It was the lightest punishment possible, but it still felt like a punch. My commander looked uncomfortable as I signed it. I fought for you. This was the best I could do. The reprimand would stay in my file forever. Any board that reviewed my record would see it. My military career had effectively ended, even if I could stay in. I walked out of his office knowing I'd never make rank again. The next few days blurred together with lawyer meetings, therapy appointments, and school conferences. Every step forward felt like 2 steps back. But we kept going because what else could we do? The boys needed normal as much as we could give them. Even if normal now meant counselors and courtrooms and nightmares that wouldn't stop. Daniel started therapy 3 weeks later as part of his custody agreement with CPS. I got the report copy from my lawyer showing what he told his therapist. He sat in that office admitting he'd noticed Vanessa getting too close to the boys months before the wedding. He'd seen her touching my son's shoulder too long and sitting too close during movie nights. The therapist wrote down every word and sent it straight to CPS as required by his treatment plan. Vanessa's parents showed up at my lawyer's office the next week with their own attorney and a check. They wanted to settle Jacob's civil claim quietly without any court filing that would make headlines. The settlement papers guaranteed Jacob would have therapy paid through age 21 with no limits on sessions. Their lawyer made us sign papers saying we couldn't talk about the money to anyone ever. Vanessa's lawyer stumbling through explanations about the phone evidence while she sits there touching her face seems like such a calculated performance. Makes me wonder if they rehearsed this whole nervous act beforehand to gain sympathy from the judge during the hearing. My son went back to the school with a safety plan the counselor helped us write. Kids whispered when he walked down the halls, and some moved away from him at lunch. We practiced breathing exercises in the car before school, but some mornings he just sat there shaking. I'd have to call him in sick, and we'd try again the next day. The prosecutor called me into her office to show me what they'd found in Vanessa's sealed therapy records. 3 other kids from her past had made reports that got buried by different therapists. She withdrew the plea deal right there and said they were adding charges for each prior victim. Harper sat me down in her office with coffee and warned me what was coming. Vanessa's defense attorney would attack everything about my military service and how I raised my son. We started doing practice sessions where Harper grilled me like I was on the witness stand. She made me answer the same questions over and over until I could stay calm no matter what she asked. Jacob's foster family sent updates through CPS saying he was doing better each week. He needed therapy twice a week and still had nightmares, but they were committed to keeping him. They told the social worker they'd adopt him if Daniel's rights got terminated completely. My son started his community service at the domestic violence shelter downtown. He helped sort donations and clean the playroom where kids stayed while their moms met with counselors. The coordinator said working there seemed to help him understand he wasn't alone in what happened. Other kids had been hurt too, and seeing them heal helped him believe he could heal. I sat at my kitchen table after the boys went to bed surrounded by stacks of papers. Legal bills from Harper that ate up my savings and therapy schedules for both boys. Court dates circled on the calendar and CPS meeting notes scattered everywhere. The case would drag on for months more with depositions and hearings and evaluations. But tonight my son was sleeping in his bed down the hall instead of juvenile detention. Jacob was safe with people who protected him instead of the house where nobody believed him. That had to be enough for now because it was all we had while we waited for the system to work. Thanks for letting me wander along with you all today. It really makes you look at things a little differently. Until next time. And if you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.